Hi, Kemal.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thank you
So,
for inviting me.
well, thank you for joining us. Your office looks like really clean. What happened there?
Well, I tidied up for you.
Mm, very nice. So, well, thank you for joining us. So, as you know, we are trying to do these more like an educational session for our employees, for our clients. So, we are utilizing this in so many different ways. We change our format a little bit. So you may be the first victim of the change. So with the different screens running, so we are going to kind of have a dialogue.
Okay.
We have talked about the reporting module, the collection module before. We just want to kind of explain the flow, what happens, why people are going into collection, and what your process is, and you are in charge of the collection module specifically. So what do you have for us?
So I just wanted to just kind of initially summarize what it is. So basically, the collections module that we have in specialty practice management it's a function, and it's a function to capture the overdue patient balances. And it also has customizable features that I will highlight a couple of them based on organizations' preferred criteria. So we're going to some of the features that we in United Medical use and have standardized. There are two items that we have. One of them is the aging feature, and the other one is the payment feature. So the aging feature, what that does is it tells the system, basically when you run the module, it tells the system where to classify the balances, what buckets to put the balances in. And then based on that, you also have sufficient payment definitions or insufficient payment definitions. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that one. So that's the main thing. It's just the aging feature, first of all. The second, which goes along with the aging feature, is the payment definition. So that is how much of a balance the patient has and how much of a payment they have made towards that balance. And that will tell the system whether to put the account into a collection stage or a pre-collection stage, or whether to just leave the account as is. So those two features really go hand in hand. And that's some of the things that I wanted to highlight and just kind of make sure everyone understands and knows, because you can have a balance that is overdue, and if you make it a sufficient payment based on the system's definition, then you're fine. If you don't make a sufficient payment or you make no payment at all on your account, then that's where you go into the next stages of the collections process.
So this is like just to kind of maybe separate the issue from the collection from the regular billing collection versus this is the self-pay collection. We are not a collection company. We are a billing company. So we are using a third party, but there is still work that we have to do. And then when, I mean, the last thing that we want is to put any of our patients to collection. And then this is the process that we are going through before it happens. So why someone may be in collection, right?
Right. So really the reason why someone would be in collections is that they don't pay their bill. So we send sufficient statements. The patients also receive notifications from their insurances whenever a claim is processed and how much they owe, if they owe anything to the provider. But basically, why a patient will go to collections is if they do not contact us, if they receive enough statements and they don't make any kind of payment at all, then at that point they would go into the collections process.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing is that we do this on behalf of our clients, so we don't actually turn anyone into collection unless we do have their approval, right?
Correct. So we pre-screen accounts. Once the system defines a patient account as being collections eligible, or we also say in the pre-collections process, we screen those accounts. So again, we manually go in there, we review to make sure the patient did receive sufficient statements, make sure that the patient has not made any recent payments. Because if they have made recent payments and they still owe, that's okay. We don't go into the collection stage at that point. Also, we verify to make sure the patients are not Medicaid patients, because we do not send any bills or collections to Medicaid patients. So we pre-screen the accounts that way. Then we send a report over to our clients and letting them know, hey, these are the accounts that we have pre-screened that we see are eligible for collections. Do we have your approval, basically, to send them over to the third party, to the agency? But we do not send anybody unless we get specific approval from the clients.
And the process that you go through right before, if you, with the new format, so it may be a little bit difficult for people to follow. So the process that we go through, so in our practice management system in the SPM, so everything is set up in a way that someone would be identified as pre-collection, right? So, but then you take, with your team, you take those patients and then put them into the collection module, but we use our QuickBase. And then we want to actually provide the most accurate information to our clients. So then whether or not the patient received minimum 2 statements, if it's for the same amount, and if there's an attempt to make payments. So those are being all sorted out by your team. So that way we wouldn't make any mistakes in terms of the collection.
Correct. That's why we say we pre-screen the accounts. So the system gathers the information for us. We integrate that information with QuickBase. So in QuickBase, that is where we start our process and we start our work. We start the pre-screening, and from QuickBase as well is where we send the reports to the clients for approval.
Yep. So some clients are not using collection module. Why do you think they are not?
I believe they may just be afraid to upset their patients. Because nobody wants to go to collections. Nobody wants to be told, hey, you have this overdue balance, it's going to affect your credit score. So I believe that there's that stigma that if you send a patient to collections, they may get way too upset. They might not want to come back to the office. And I can understand that point of view, but at the end of the day, they're legit balances that are due. You're not going to not pay your credit card bill just because you forgot about it, or you think there may not be any kind of repercussions about it. But I believe that's, in my opinion, why maybe some clients do not want to participate in the collections process. But I also know that there are some clients that, depending on their specialty, they may be more inclined to kind of not worry too much about their overdue patient balances just based on the patient's condition, or again, based on their specialty. But that's what I've noticed in my years in working in the department and my experience in it.
From the healthy flow of the practice, they have to make decisions for these balances. Otherwise, it just accumulates to a point where we have some clients, they haven't used any collection activities, as you know, and they may be like, there may be balances of some patients for 10 years, 9 years, and they need to be cleaned up. So then there's no activity happening, and then sometimes patient gets upset because they didn't receive a statement. Someone in the office approaches them, and then they're like, well, how come you didn't send me a statement? Well, we did, but it was 5 years ago, 7 times. So it's just the system, right? The system needs to be followed. So, and then you were one of the drivers of the initial system that we set up, where we sent certified letters to our clients because we want to make sure that they acknowledge the collection process. They also let us know that this is their choice. If they don't want to use it, we are not going to force them. but we want those clients to have a clean account, and also patients to not have those issues in the future.
Right. I do want to highlight what you just said, Kemal. We're not forcing the clients to do this. So we're not charging extra for this process, for this work. The reason we do it is because we care about the overall client's health. We care about their accounts. We care about their days in AR. So we do this really to help them. And that's why we really, really encourage the clients to use this help and the service that we're offering, just because, again, it does, if you don't use it, it does impact your overall days in AR. Again, it makes it harder to collect the balances. After a certain amount of time, after 7 years, you can't legally collect any balance anyway. So if you have accounts that are 8, 9, 10 years old, that's just money lost. Whereas if you were participating in the process, you could have gained some of that revenue in.
Absolutely. And also, just like any other business, so when you go to ShopRite or like Acme or wherever people go, so you go there, then you don't leave those places and not pay, right? So although a couple of times I left a couple of the pharmacies without paying, but I had to come back and pay. I forgot, so they didn't stop me. But that probably is irrelevant. So our business is so interesting. People just come in, they have a copay, it's $20. They don't pay. Fine. So now we have to send a statement. So you send a statement for the $20, each statement $1, and then another one, and another one. So then only to get something at the time of service, you spend 15% of that for the statement fees. So then someone goes to collection for $50, and then they get really upset when we turn them into collection. But the simple solution is paid at the time of the service, and then this is when clients also needs to make sure that their front desk is proactively letting the client know what the patient know that what needs to be collected. And then once you have this habit of not collecting, they then become a bigger balance a year later, 2 years later. So, and it becomes a big responsibility. And then you have a specific team to go through these so that we won't make any mistakes in the process. So that's a lot of work. Now, one thing that I wanted, since you mentioned that when we do this, actually, not necessarily we don't charge or we don't make anything extra, we lose money. Every time you put someone in collection, we actually lose money. How? Because we normally would charge our percentage, and when someone goes to collection, we don't actually charge our collection fee, our billing fee to those clients. So we have no interest in putting someone in collection. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's something that we want to make sure that we highlight. But one other thing, Muriel, since you are explaining this so well, the health of the data and how we can actually compare a practice with another practice. From the statistics standpoint, we lose the ability to compare practices if we don't follow the standards. And the collection is one of those standards, right?
Exactly. It's funny that you mentioned that, Kemal, because I was actually going through and trying to find a case study to show the audience, hey, this is what happens when you use the collections process. But we have very few clients that continually participate in the collections process. So it was actually kind of difficult finding a good case study to present. But yes, it is very important that once a client does participate in the collections process, they do it on an ongoing basis. Whenever we send the reports over to the clients for approval, it's important that we get that information back as soon as possible, because then you can go months and months without any activity. And again, accounts start piling up. So you never really clean up the account in that sense. But yeah, it's very important for clients. And I want to reiterate that it's very important for clients to continually participate in the collections process for the overall health of the account, and just to make sure that the patient balances are kept at a decent level.
You know, this is kind of interesting as I'm thinking about this. So what's the next topic today is with Anthony and Ugu. When it came up, it was during one of our presentations last week. It's the social determinant of health, and it's actually one of the Medicaid initiatives. Now, last night, one of our business development members, Kim Taylor, she presented social determinant of health in our providers meetings. And then I wanted to add that to this session with Anthony's presentation. But when you really think about it, it's kind of ironic that it is the part that makes it more difficult for our providers, most likely, because what we deal with is not like someone comes to you and then buys something. It's, you are providing healthcare. And when you're doing that, in some cases, you can't really just be too harsh to these patients. So then, in an ironic way, then these two topics came in the same session. So if you really think about it, because we are not saying that, because we can't really, there are some patients who really cannot pay, and we want them to come. If you remember our discussions with our patients with the bariatric surgeries, so if they don't follow through, just thinking that they have to pay copay and then they are going to be in collection because of that, we don't want that problem, because that's part of maybe that social determinant of health. In a way, this was not staged, so we didn't actually plan it. I just thought about it as I'm just going through some of those things. So we are going to discuss the other topic with Anthony, but I think that's something that we have to maybe appreciate, so that it's not just the service itself. So what we are providing is probably important. And I think maybe that's the challenge for some of the providers.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. And then also going back to your point about maybe some patients really can't pay their copays or deductibles, or whatever the situation may be. It's important, as long as there's some kind of a communication, which is why we manually review the accounts. We could easily just have the system automatically process these accounts, write them off, send them over to the agency, but there isn't that human touch to it. So we manually review the accounts. If we see there's an attempt, patients are calling in, or they're trying to pay up their bill, or they're trying to set up on a payment plan, or they just really can't pay, but at least there's an attempt, there's a communication about it, then, we consider that. We consider that in the pre-screening process. And then,
Very important, actually. Communication is, although these things are all maybe happening, we want that communication from the client. So then we can take the precautions, so then we can make necessary changes in the account. So that's very important.
Exactly.
Muriel,